Jason Hope, Town Manager. In anticipation of voting on September 12th, I'm joined today by the moderator and the town clerk to answer some basic questions and answers about voting. As you may know, there is a different location this year, and there are just the usual mechanics of voting that we felt it would be good to talk about. So I'm going to start first with Barry. Where is voting this year?
Voting this year will be at the Pollard School on Main Street in Plaistow. And I would think it's probably the first time we've been at Pollard now in, say, 10 to 15 years.
And what hours can people come over and vote?
The hours are the same as they've been for many years, 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening.
All right. And school's in session that day. So
Right.
how is that going to work?
Well, we were in touch with the school district, and they were in favor of us using the Pollard School. This year, for the primary, school will be in session. However, we've made arrangements, we think, that are very satisfactory. And the rest of our elections this year, the school is going to make every attempt to not be in session during election days.
Okay. So for voters arriving, what entrance will they be using? What plans are there for parking?
Okay. As you arrive at Pollard School and you're looking at the front of the building, the voters should be entering the side next to the funeral home. That would be the south entrance to Pollard School, the same side as the gym is on. And they can proceed up that entranceway and right up the side of the building, and there is parking for, I would say, 70 to 75 cars in the parking lot. They'll all be available to voters because the staff will be parking elsewhere that day.
Okay. And the location's accessible to people with disabilities?
Very accessible. I've had Cheryl Killam come down from the state, and she's inspected the building, the entrances and the exits, and this facility meets all the handicapped regulations that the state and federal government has for voters with disabilities.
Right. We're taping this a few days before the actual vote, so I'm going to ask you, Mary Ellen, can people still get absentee ballots, and what's the cutoff for requesting an absentee?
As long as they are already registered. As of today's the last day to register at the town hall to be on the list. After today, you would have to register at the polls.
Okay.
So if you're on the list or you register today, you can get an absentee ballot. We need it back in person or through the mail by Monday. Election day is Tuesday, so Monday the 11th.
Okay. What's required to register to vote if somebody's coming for the first time?
You need to prove who you are. You have to be at least 18. We can accept New Hampshire ID, passport, service ID, or any reasonable proof of ID. You have to be domiciled in New Hampshire in Plaistow. So if your ID shows your Plaistow address, we could accept that. Worst case, if you had nothing, you could sign an affidavit saying you are a resident. You could have more than one home, but you're only one domicile, so you have to prove that you live in Plaistow or sign an affidavit.
Okay. Once somebody has registered, or many people that are already registered, what happens when they walk in?
They would give their name to the check-in ladies. Their name would be checked off. They'd be handed a ballot. In this being a primary, if they're undeclared, they would have to declare a ballot, either Republican or Democrat. They go through into the booths and vote, turn their ballot into the box. Usually Barry is there, but it could be another staff person. The ballot would be entered in the machine. If they're undeclared and they want to go back to being undeclared because they just changed their party at this point, they go back to the table where the supervisors of the checklist are and sign. They'll sign on a pre-printed form this year where everybody undeclared will be printed. They'll sign their name beside their printed name, and then they'll be returned to undeclared status.
For those people that are undeclared, what happens if they forget to stop by the supervisor's table on the way back out?
They would remain whatever party they chose, either Republican or Democrat. They could come into the office after the election to redo that, change their party back to undeclared if that's what they wanted to.
Or they could come back in the November election and the supervisors and
yes, they could sign it that day too.
All right, when people are filling out the ballot, what should they know? You provide
A special marking
a special
pen.
marker, and that this is like all of the other elections that use the AccuVote, so people need to fill in.
Fill in it's a circle, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah, it's a
think it's a
circle that they
circle.
have to fill in,
Okay.
and next to the person that they are voting for. And many times, if people, I've noticed a mistake they make, sometimes there is a place for write-in candidates. And sometimes they'll put in the name of a candidate they wish to write in, but they don't fill in the circle. And that creates a problem because the voting machine only reads the column where the circles are. And so if you put in a name and don't fill in the circle, then the voting machine is not going to spit that ballot out as having a write-in. Because if you write in a candidate, we have to count that by hand.
Okay.
The machine tells us we have a write-in, but doesn't give us the name of the person, obviously.
What happens if I'm going through my ballot and I make a mistake? What do I do?
You usually come to me, the moderator, and show me what your mistake is, and if it can't be corrected on that sheet, what I'll do is I'll give you a new ballot, and I will void your old ballot, and then you'll have to use the whole ballot all over again.
Okay. So generally, the good rule of thumb, though, is if I made a mistake, I should really check with you, because if I try to X or cross out a circle, the machine isn't necessarily going to read that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Come to me first, and we can get your ballot straightened out, and then you'll be sure that your ballot's going to be counted.
Okay. So we've gone through the whole process, handed off my ballot to you. Where are we exiting the gym?
Okay. One comment I want to make before you get
Sure.
to the exit is this year, as Mary Ellen knows, the state has provided us with a new voting booth for people with disabilities. And in the past, when a person comes in with some disabilities, say it's a sight disability, they usually will bring someone in with them that will read the ballot to them, show them where to mark it, and if not, Mary Ellen or I would have to appoint someone to go with them into the booth. Well, now we have a new voting booth where the person, say, who has a disability for sight, they can use a telephone, and they'll be in contact with Concord, and they can vote over the phone. And their ballot will be marked accordingly as they dictate it should be. And then in the end, their ballot will be printed out to them. And then they'll take their ballot as every other voter does, and then hand it to the moderator, and their ballot will be counted like everybody else's.
Oh, good. And this is the first election that you're using that system?
First election, it's a state mandate with federal regulations, and every election facility has to have a handicap voting booth like this, so that a voter with almost any handicap can come in and vote without any help from anybody else.
Okay.
And with the proper access, they can come in the front door like anybody else, and they can vote just like any other voter,
Oh,
without any assistance.
In the interest of their vote being secretive, anybody can use that machine who wants to use it, any person. And if we do have somebody use it, several of the staff will use that for their vote. So there won't be just that one odd ballot that's printed out on the machine.
That's correct.
that makes sense. I guess so to the average voter, they've gone through the whole process, they've cast their ballot, and they've gone away, and then magically they see numbers in the newspaper the next day or on the town website. So why don't you help us with a little bit of the behind the scenes? What happens when the polls close?
Well, after the last voter leaves, and they'll be exiting the back entrance to the gym, and that's a handicapped, I'm going to use it as an exit, and that is a handicapped exit also, and so the people in wheelchairs can use it. So they'll be coming in one door, and they'll be exiting from another door.
Okay.
But what generally happens at the end of the day, I'll announce that the polls are going to be closing, and so anybody else who is standing around, they'll have an opportunity to come in and vote, and then at 8 o'clock, I will close the polls. At that point in time, we make sure that the voting machine is empty of all the ballots, so that there are none left in there at the end of the day. And then we will break the ballots down. Those that have write-ins on them will be separated from the regular ballots, because those are the ones that we have to count by hand. It takes probably, I would say, about a half an hour to tabulate all of the write-ins and the ballots that the machine could not count. Say that if you took a ballot and did not circle in any of the circles, then the machine will spit that out too. Or if you've got a write-in in there, all the ones that have to be done by hand, we do. Other than that, Mary Ellen, we have the clerks tabulate all the people that have come in and given their name, and we compare that to the printout that the machine gives, and they have to balance. And every year we're very lucky with the caliber of the people that work the
Yes.
polls all day long. We usually come out right on the button. And I would say the polls are closed for like a half an hour, and I'll be able to give a preliminary result, which is all the results that the machine could tabulate throughout the day. And then probably 45 minutes later, we'll have all the write-ins counted, and then we can give a final result of the voting for the day.
Now, Mary Ellen, we were talking before we taped this about write-ins a little bit too, and some advice to people writing in.
The whole process would be much faster if people didn't write in nonsense, Mickey Mouse, or their friends, only serious write-ins, because we have to write down every single name that's written down. We don't write down Mickey Mouse or Santa Claus or anything that's really silly. But if it's one name for your friend and he writes your name, we have to write those people down in case they get several votes. So if they would refrain from writing in unless it's a serious write-in.
And the other note probably is that is the full first and last name wherever possible. So if I were going to write in Barry, that it would be preferable for me to write Barry Sargent, not B Sargent. So
Absolutely.
You know who.
Right, so we can identify who that person
Okay.
is.
All right.
Yeah, because there could be more than one B sergeant, obviously.
Exactly, exactly. So while we don't grade for spelling, we do want to know the intent of the voter.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the primary issue. What is the intent of the voter? Every time a machine does not count a vote and it spits it out and doesn't count it, we do look them over and try to get the intent of the voter. And if we can tell the intent, then that's exactly what we do.
Great. I think we've covered the whole range of things that people can expect. I think if between the time somebody watches this and voting day, if they have questions, they can contact any of us at our offices or ask their questions that voting day,
Right.
which once again is September 12th, and polls are open 8 to 8.
I do want to add one other thing too, and that is that as most of Plaistow residents know, Pollard School is very busy in the morning with buses and parents arriving with their children. And from 7:30 to 8:30, quarter of 9, it's very busy over there. So and then from say 2 to 3 o'clock roughly in the afternoon, during that time there will be a lot of traffic out front of Pollard School. I've been in touch with Chief of Police Steve Savage. There will be an extra officer out front, specifically at the entrance for the voters, to assist them in coming in and with traffic control, in addition to the regular crossing guard. But if you could find it in your day to not come during those 2 hours in particular, it would be a lot easier probably for you to get in and out. You know.
That's good advice.
But other than that, I really see Pollard School as a challenge. I don't see this as any issue that we can't overcome. I'm sure there'll be a couple of wrinkles we're going to have to work out during the day, but nothing that we can't handle.
Great. Good. Well, thank you for joining me, and we look forward to seeing everybody on the 12th.
We certainly do.
Thanks again.
Yep.